Hey everybody, welcome to Monday, and I am going to do a lot of caveats on this video before I start because I want to be very clear what this video is and what it's not, okay? This video is for information purposes only for people who are actually interested in facts instead of just people screaming at each other on the internet, okay? This is not taking a side in some debate that I really don't care about involving the relaunch of Attack of the Show on G4. I just happen to have some actual information to add to the conversation that some people might be interested in, and so I'm sharing it. So anybody who tries to make this something that it's not, as any attack on a particular host or former host or faction or whatever, or my opinions on greater things in gaming or media, it's not that. This is just information. If you're interested in my opinions on things connected to this, we can deal with this on Feedback Friday, but let's get some bloody facts down, okay? If you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. So, what is this about for people who don't know? There was a kerfuffle late last week. Kerfuffle is a technical term. No, I'm kidding. Regarding, I don't know what her name is. I watched the clip. I looked at her Twitter profile. I don't know what her actual name is. But a new host on the new G4TV's new Attack of the Show made some comment about women like Morgan Webb and Olivia Munn not being on the former version of the show to be eye candy. Now, I was a little bit confused about the Morgan Webb thing because she was more X-Play, but I might have missed something there. And if anybody cares, here's what it was like to be a woman on a show on G4TV back in the day when Olivia Munn and Morgan Webb were working on the show. Because the show I co-hosted, Ed and Red's Night Party, was syndicated on G4TV back in the day, at that time. I also worked directly with Olivia twice, one when the show launched, and she interviewed us. She was very, very new at that point because the male co-host at the time didn't want to do the interview, so she jumped in at the last minute. But there was also a Slave Leia bikini, I forget what they called it, talent contest, beauty pageant, I forget what the branding was, at San Diego Comic-Con one year because Olivia was known for wearing the Leia bikini, and I was part of a group called leiasmetalbikini.com, and we all had the bikinis, and there was a talent contest, and I did belly dancing in a Leia bikini, and so I got to do a couple scenes with Olivia that were comical. The clip is on YouTube somewhere. People have already found it, so you can corroborate that, yes, I was in the same breathing space as Olivia Munn at least once. But there was also a large G4 presence at E3 multiple times. The first E3 I ever went to was because of the launch of Ed and Red's Night Party on G4. And that was the first time I worked with Olivia. And to see, so it's twofold to me. One, I actually got to see the reactions to myself being on a show on G4. And then I got to be in this really interesting position of listening to what people said about the hosts of X-Play and Attack of the Show, notably the female hosts, and then hear a little bit about sort of the inside baseball stuff going on at G4TV. Now, one of the things to keep in mind about G4TV is it wasn't very well organized. Everything was sort of half on fire at the best of days, at least our experiences with them. Every time we did anything with them, it was always very last minute, very disorganized. The communications were bizarre. Our show was actually pretty heavily censored in the US version, but that was not so much because of G4 and more because of the FCC not allowing as much as the CRTC up here in Canada, involving things like nudity and, sexual scenes and things like that. We had a hot tub on our show, and you're allowed to have toplessness on Canadian television after what's called the watershed hour, which I think at the time, our show was on 11:35 at night. So, but obviously, yes, it was a sexualized depiction. I wore sexy clothes. There were dancers in the show. There were girls in a hot tub, all that stuff. And this was a show on G4TV. This was when they were trying to compete with Spike for more of that guy market. Our show tended to rate almost neck and neck. As many women watched our show as men because we calibrated it to not insult women's intelligence. The idea, and I'm going to be very clear, I think it was misstated, and I'm going to say what I think the intent was and some of the feelings behind it, because they're different things. What the statement was and where I think the statement was coming from as a speculation are different things, and I think both require unpacking to really understand what it's like to be a woman in this job. Okay? I'll touch on men in similar jobs as well. Just my perspective obviously comes down on one side of this. My observations, on the other hand, different story. But the statement that women were not on G4TV, Attack of the Show, anything like that, to be looked at, to be eye candy, is just patently not true. Not only is it patently not true, even though there was some vanity among the male co-hosts on those similar programs, it was pretty obvious it was not nearly as important for men on those shows to hit a certain, beauty standard as it was for the women. Women were, from what I observed, in my interactions with things like Attack of the Show, the women were given less, opportunity to rewrite, less creative control, less opportunity to put words in their own mouths. All those shows are pre-scripted. All those shows are telepromptered. You definitely got the sense that a guy like Adam Sessler was allowed to have a lot more say in the words put in his mouth than Morgan Webb did. And this could be completely wrong. My perspectives could be completely wrong. This is just what I saw observing. When I'm in environments like this, I like to hang around. I like to observe because I like to learn. And I reporter's instincts, right? I just watch what's going on and observe. Olivia Munn was different because she cultivated this persona that, was deliberately sort of a, I don't use this word, but, cutthroat bitch thing, which worked, a sort of step on me mommy kind of thing, which allowed her to transcend and do more self-driven stuff. And let me tell you, I respected the hell out of Olivia for that. Taking the bull by the horns, using what she had, using the fact that she's an objectively stunningly attractive woman, but also she wanted to do more than just read a teleprompter. She wanted to be more involved in having a persona and producing pieces and showing her comedy abilities. And, I think unfortunately she didn't get enough credit for that on Attack of the Show because people didn't realize there was a persona there, right? But she's done very well for herself. Every time I worked with her, she was like eye of the tiger professional. And she did a lot of stuff without prompter, which is very significant in two ways. One, that she was able to do it. One, that she was allowed to do it. The things I observed with Morgan Webb were way more complicated and Morgan Webb got the shit end of the stick in a lot of ways from both ends. And this is the thing I really wanted to talk to regarding the whole attractiveness standard on G4 back in the day. Because this statement that, they weren't there for eye candy is patently false. But there's another layer to it that I think you guys will find interesting. I know this was interesting to me. I remember I was there and there was a bit of a behind the scenes kerfuffle. Again, people didn't pay a ton of attention to me, so I heard things I wasn't supposed to hear. This debate about whether Morgan Webb's legs were too distracting for the TV show. Yeah, she was wearing like a knee-length skirt, and there was some concern that her legs were too distracting. So not only did she need to be attractive as part of the job, but she couldn't be so attractive that she eclipsed the male co-stars. And that's something Olivia Munn was allowed to do. Olivia Munn was allowed to eclipse her male co-stars, I think, because she, wouldn't abide anything less. Olivia, you can tell I have a lot of respect for Olivia Munn. But Olivia leveraged her attractiveness and learned a persona that would allow her to do that. And there was sort of trial and error. Morgan couldn't do that in the same way because of the structure of X-Play and the fact that it was this back and forth. And yeah, the writers would give her the less detail-oriented lines, in part because of who Adam Sessler was and some of the apparent, again, just an opinion, not stated fact. He needed to be the guy. It was sort of a joke among all those male geek show hosts at the time of, the attention they put on their appearance, and yet it was, obviously they weren't the one people were looking at. I mean, there was a lot of, they were, and remember I said I'd touch on the male host thing. There were nasty comments made about the appearance of both the male and female talent on G4 at the time. It was obvious to anybody with a brain that a woman being considered not hot in that format was far more damaging to her ongoing career process than if a guy was considered not hot. I was never considered attractive enough, except in the Leia bikini. Like, this is a fucked up thing. The only time I'm ever considered attractive enough for American TV is when I'm just there to be looked at. So when I'm doing cosplay, or when I'm, doing more cosplay. When it is strictly an image. Look at me. Then I hit some standard. The minute I open my mouth and state an opinion, then we get into the not the right look, not in the demographic, all the euphemisms for not hot enough. I'm the same person in the same time period, but and it's just as often female executives deep sexing these segments as men, or male producers or female producers. So this is not something men do to women. This is something all decision makers and gatekeepers do to women. And it was the damnedest thing to be considered, hot enough to win a Slave Leia bikini contest on G4, but not for anything requiring words. Make of that what you will. Okay? And that's where I think it's, Olivia Munn's very carefully crafted persona, and the fact that Morgan Webb was the nicer host. And there were other women on G4. I think it's interesting that those were the two that sort of rose above it all. But, Morgan being very girl next door, very nice girl, really put her in a box in a way that I found very frustrating on her behalf, and maybe that's overstepping. Maybe I don't have a right to be frustrated on her behalf, but to sit back and observe how male colleagues commented on her was really, really instructive. Because there was a real lack of professionalism among, big surprise, games journalists, print, internet, even other TV games journalists when it came to people like Morgan Webb. I remember two guys from a website I was also doing writing on. They went by the G4 booth during E3, and they were standing there going, "That's Morgan Webb. Oh my God, that's Morgan Webb. She's so hot." Like, they're saying this around. And of course, they were looking at her legs because she was wearing a skirt slightly below the knee. And the complete and utter lack of professionalism floored me. There's a way to express that you find someone attractive. I do it all the time. That is not zombie brain tongue falling out of your mouth drooling. And I wish the focus was less on what women are there to do. Because both men and women, if you were in any sort of visual medium, it benefits you if people think you're relatively nice to look at. It does. Male and female alike. And again, I want to stick a pin in some jobs, you can't be too attractive. The size of my boobs has been a problem for me again, because people are fine when they're just looking at me, but the minute I want to talk, then it's a problem, right? So it's not just that you have to be attractive. It's that you can't be so attractive that you might become dominant or aggressive. Again, extremely important distinction to make. Extremely important distinction to make, because that is not the same as just, let's put eye candy all over the place and just go whole hog, which is what we did on our show. We were like, we're going to have every type of woman we can possibly permutate on this show. Look where you want. Very popular in prison back in the day. The fans really liked it, but, the show was called Sexist, even though we were being body positive and showing that, women of color are beautiful back way before it was trendy. And we gave every woman on the show a chance to talk. There was a live mic that anybody got at any point based on my own experiences of being perfectly attractive enough back in the day until it involved speaking. And then it was a problem. Because again, you have to be attractive but non-threatening. And that attractive but non-threatening thing is what I think feeds into this current G4 kerfuffle and the deliberately calibrated moves G4 is making. And I don't blame the current host, the person at the and I say person because I've seen the entertainer referred to as non-binary and female. I don't know which, so I'm going to err on the side of non-binary. That's not an insult. I'm just trying to be careful, right? But, the performer, the host, is doing this with the full permission and support of G4TV. So if you want to be mad at G4, be mad at G4. Don't be mad at the performer. She is just doing her job. Okay? They were hired because they have tattoos, and they were hired because they have, I don't know what you call that haircut that looks like it was done with a weed whacker. They were hired for that look. That look could have been styled. I don't know what they look like before. All this is calibrated. They will tell you to change your hair. If I had to take off earrings and have certain hairstyles for television, they tell you, you have stylists. You are told what to wear. You are cast for that look. So if you want to be mad at G4TV. Don't be mad at the individual personality. They are hired to do a job. Now, I want to get into the feeling, okay, that I think drove some of these comments. And just because the comments aren't factual doesn't mean the insecurities behind them aren't valid. Because as somebody who has been told, as I got into numerous times during my career, that I'm not hot enough, it can stick to you. Now, some of you have seen some of the encounters I've had with people online. No, I kind of don't care. Part of it is I'm too old to give a fuck. But also, that's just not what I do. That's not, I mean, yeah, okay, I do the Beelzebub character, but come on, that's a joke, right? I did it. I did pinup modeling. I was paid to do pinup modeling. I was a pinup model in a video game. You know, there were times I got paid to be hot in, you know, numerous different circumstances. And yet there was still debates on whether I was hot enough, whether I was thin enough, whether my boobs were real, this, that, and the next thing. And it does chip away at you in a way that is very hard to... It's very hard to explain what it does when you're doing your best to look your best. Genetics has a lot to do with it. Opportunities for exercise, how much money you have to throw into things like, you know, a lot of people get a lot of surgery and, you know, a lot of personal services and diet and, you know, these vitamin injections and all these things. It's being super hot is incredibly expensive. And in a service like G4TV, they often aren't paid enough to do, like, you know, the kind of stuff that, say, Angelina Jolie can do to look, you know, Eternals level hot at her age. So this is all important to understand, but also the way it wears you down, the way you sort of dread somebody calling you on that, because for women in the industry, it does strike terror into you, because it is sort of put to you that even if they don't say it, no, your job primarily is to be hot. And if you can get in anything else, well, more power to you. But first and foremost, smile and look pretty. And I can understand why somebody would have to put themselves into a state of denial to overcome sort of the existential crisis that creates inside of you. Especially when you're younger. I know it was way scarier for me when I was younger. I had a lot of rituals and I had a lot of things I did to sort of overcome that fear of, no matter how funny I was, if someone in a position of authority, someone in a position to do casting, decided I wasn't hot enough, or the wrong kind of hot, or my boobs were too big, or my butt was too big, or my, you know, something wasn't small enough, or I didn't have thigh gap or something like that. I was actually, I lost a cover of a men's magazine, you know, like one of those Maxim style magazines, for being too sexy. I think I just wasn't skinny enough for, you know, I had boobs and butt, but they told me that if they put me on the cover, their sponsors would drop them. I don't buy that for a fucking second. I think they thought I was fat, but that was the excuse a men's magazine gave me. This is the shit we go through, right? And then we're put out there and we're treated like pieces of meat because people who aren't Hollywood sociopaths have a, you know, they look for reasons to opt women in. Women tend to be worse to other women than men do. You know, I find in media, but some guys are just fucking awful because they're, you know, they try to control women. Some men, some treat women like property. Most guys are the other way. They're sort of tongue-tied and, you know, and the average person on the street, I know I dunked on game journalists for doing that, but that's professional obligation. Somebody just off the street, if they get a little tongue-tied, okay, good. It's the people who think they have the right to lay hands on you, or holy shit, grab the fucking Leia chain. You know, there's that chain around the Jabba collar, right? A couple of guys, not many, 99% of the people who ever took photos with me were absolutely lovely, but those couple of guys that decided to grab it and pull it because they could. I almost took a swing at a guy once. By the time I was done doing sort of the booth modeling, I was so done with having my ass grabbed and my boobs grabbed and forcibly kissed and the tugging and the pulling and the just violation of boundaries that I had to hold myself back from physically attacking a couple of these guys. I was so done. Now, part of that is I had a knee injury by the end and I was in constant pain wearing heels and stuff like that. I was still doing the jobs, but it was tough. But part of it was just I got sick of being, pardon the turn of phrase, but manhandled on the job. That's not part of the job. And unfortunately, we have this dichotomy in women in media that the vast majority of guys in male-oriented media where women are there to be eye candy and then other things, right? The vast majority of guys are great and they know what it is and they can be respectful even if they're kind of shy and tongue-tied, right? It's that tiny minority of horrible assholes. And keep in mind, there are a lot of sociopaths and narcissists in entertainment media. It attracts them because they can exploit people, right? And they can be very charming in short bursts. But it is that sliver of assholes that causes women to just go off and do these girl power, like clobber speeches that are just factually inaccurate, but it's self-delusion for emotional survival. And I ask for a certain amount of understanding and compassion on that level because you're acutely aware, when Morgan Webb has to look like Morgan Webb and Adam Sessler can start looking, increasingly like E.T. over the years. I love E.T. I love E.T., but Morgan Webb had to look like she hadn't aged a second from the time she started on X-Play to the time she finished, right? And she was very sweet. Very, very sweet. But I can't imagine the pressure, especially with you got to be attractive, but not distracting. And let me tell you, that added layer of not distracting kills your fucking soul. Because that's the part where it's like, not distracting from what? Because it's not distracting from what she's saying or what I'm saying, right? Because you learn very, very quickly, the producers don't give a fuck about what you're saying. You have to do what you can to provide better content to the fans because it's sponsor-driven pander crap, okay? But the problem is it's not distracting what you're saying. You're distracting from what Adam Sessler or Kevin what's-his-name is saying or whoever the new hosts are now. You can't distract from the man who's there to talk primarily. And if some girls think he's hot, so be it. If some guys think he's hot, awesome. Do they watch? Fine. But they're not our primary demographic. You're there primarily to be seen and not distract. And they can say, look, we have a woman there. And we give her 3 lines to say. But that's not the woman's fault. And I think that we can both have compassion for these hostesses, female hosts, female or non-binary hosts, who are slowly driven crazy by this contradictory dichotomy, and call bullshit on it. But please don't attack her. Okay, I completely understand. I did similar inaccurate crap when I was younger. There's a reason for it. Try to understand the reason for it. You can object to the underlying fallacious statements without hating her as a person. And I just ask that you try to understand, yeah, guys get made fun of for how they look too. They do. I'm not denying that. More comments than I can count were made about Adam Sussler's ever-growing, like, rear bald spot at E3s. And, you know, the amount of pancake makeup a lot of those guys wore. He was not the biggest culprit for that, but I'm sticking on G4 right now, so I'm gonna leave other people their dignity for, not that I'm trying to rob anybody dignity, I'm just telling the truth of what was said, right? Full disclosure, men do get it too. But the consequences of guys seeming to age or guys seeming not hot in those vehicles is not as severe because, oh no, he knows what he's talking about. People actually got irritated if you knew what you were talking about, or worse, you actually seemed to like what you were talking about. You were supposed to be okay with it, but never better than the guys, never more informed than the guys, never more opinionated than the guys. I'm happy to say that's changed to a certain extent. We still have further to go, but the problem is a lot of the people making the decisions back in the day are still in these fucking jobs because there's nowhere for them to go. And they're the ones go and respect the women's, right? Meanwhile, they don't. Meanwhile, they still have that same knee-jerk, don't be distracting as they always did. And this is why I sit here in my little corner of the world and do my own content instead of having to deal with that shit on a regular basis. Precisely because it sucks your sanity and steals your soul. So, you know, I want you guys to know the truth. I'm sure I will get accused of a whole bunch of things that are ridiculous because people don't want to hear the truth. But for the people that appreciate me just providing this information, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.